from the time was very spontaneous. There was no real organizing or preparing to organize or preparing different things. It was just people getting together and doing what they decided at that time. So we effectively, we managed to stop the evictions, but about 3 months or 4 months later, the state started to disconnect water, disconnect families from water, from receiving water, because they couldn't afford it. Water was privatized because of the 1993 agreement. Companies like Leonardo East, Suez, and others, they formed partnership with local South African companies, and you know, in that way owns or proposed to own these different resources. Leonardo East just got a new 25-year contract. They just got a new 25-year contract on our dams that we have in the Western Cape. We have 3 dams in the Western Cape, and they just built a new one. And Leonardo East, the 3 dams that we have, they have the contract for these 3 dams, or with the 3 dams. So, Group 5 is a South African company. Leonardo East is a French company. Together, they form Water Sanitation South Africa, which sounds like a state entity, but it's a private entity, which creates scales for poor people, for repayment of water. Before in South Africa, we used to get water accounts every 3 months, and just as a reference, hypothetical suggestion is that in that time we pay maybe $5, right? During apartheid, every 3 months you pay $5. Post-apartheid, you have to pay every month, and it was on a rising scale, which means you do get free water, by the way. You get 6 kiloliters, which is hardly enough for families in poor communities. It usually starts with 3 people, or maybe 17 in a family, in one particular family. So 6 kiloliters of water is hardly any water. But nevertheless, when you use your 6 kiloliters of water, then you start paying on a rising scale, which starts at R1.38, and I'm talking about at that time. It was R1.39 per kiloliter, and if you use a certain amount again, then it rises to R3 something per kiloliter, and if you use more than that, it can end up being R7 something per kiloliter. But at the same time, when we were charged this rising scale, in our more affluent communities, or the more higher class communities like Constantia, Upper Wynberg, all these nice areas at the foot of Table Mountain, or the mountainous space there, they were being charged also at the rising scale. They weren't receiving the free water, but they were being charged, the scale started at 63 cents. And they were the ones that had the big pools, the big fields, all these different things, but they were paying less for the water on a different scale. I must explain that the anti-eviction campaign used to be a very hierarchical organization with a chairperson, secretary, all the different things. But 2 years after our inception, like in 2003, 2004, when we had our strategic planning workshop or discussion, we found that this committee that we've elected actually does nothing. They actually do absolutely nothing. All they do is talk to each other, and they just politic. They talk about different things happening in different communities, but they actually do nothing. And at the same time, when they are doing nothing, there is actual struggles happening in the community. So we disbanded our committees, our structure. The next year, however, when we had our AGM, our communities almost demanded that we have a coordinating structure, because in 2003 we handed back power to our communities. So, and they were feeling it. They were really using that power, because we then had actions in different communities at the same time, because they were able to plan and exercise it when they planned. And when there was this committee or the structure that we had, all communities first come to the structure and then go back to the community report, and then there'll be an action. So now it was the direct action by the people affected and for the people affected. Like different communities had different issues. One would be dealing with education, another would be dealing with water. and they were able to exercise their actions at any given time. So they weren't waiting for another community or, yeah. The anti-eviction campaign is a direct action, so we particularly, like a meeting of this nature, would be to discuss an action that we'll have after the meeting. So that was the way the anti-eviction campaign proposed to work. And that's exactly how it was working. We also stretched out, we went to other communities. That's why we called the Western Cape, because it was only in the community that I come from that we had the anti-eviction campaign, which was Tafelsig. And about 3 months later, we got involved in about 15 to 17 different communities, which was facing exactly the same problem that we were facing. We did do research. We didn't know it was research at the time. We just collected the invoices, rent, electricity, water, from the different families in the community. And when we were analyzing, when we were looking through this, we tried to get professional people involved, academics involved, and people involved in this. And when we were analyzing it, we saw that almost 98% of the people will be evicted. If the eviction on the 18th was anything to go by, that there would be 98% of the people in our community that would face exactly the same thing. And I think that is what spurred the community into action. Because then we had the water wars, what we called the water wars, or the press was calling it the water wars. Right? We then had the water wars in September of 2001, where there was a proposal to disconnect 1,300 families from the disconnecting water meters of 1,300 families. We then took up a different stance. We would organize in such a way that 4 o'clock in the morning, every morning, we would barricade our community. And for 3 weeks we would do that. For 3 weeks, every day, we would barricade our community in the morning and do it in shifts and change posts and move around in our community, and the borders rather, so that we can control who comes in and who goes out. However, after the water wars, the police, together with the army, to disconnect one person would mean that almost 32 vehicles would be used to disconnect one person, which means it's the South African Police Services, the law enforcement, which is the city police sort of, and there's also city police that we have, metro police that is trained in Washington, as a matter of fact, that would accompany with a unit or a regiment of the South African National Defence Force, so that this water can be disconnected. However, when they left, all that we did is we removed the meter, we put in a straight pipe, we put in some stones and some sand and some cement, and then we would have straight connections. So we would not be disconnected again. We managed to stop that. In 2004, in December, there was an uprising in a community in the South Peninsula which marched to a local councillor because people were being evicted on a Sunday. People were being evicted. So we marched to this councillor's office, and we spent the whole day, from 9 o'clock in the morning to probably past 1 the next morning, early morning, late night, or whatever you refer to it. We managed to get Indian Mfecto, which was the mayor at that time. We managed to influence a decision, because she called a moratorium on all evictions immediately, which was at 1 o'clock on the Monday morning. Right? It wasn't official, so we were hoping to get an official paper, paper that would protect us from being evicted. And we did. The very next day she called an emergency meeting. That moratorium still stands today. So there's a moratorium on evictions of council-owned property, rented dwellings, but not bank-owned property, not private property. No, there's no moratorium, but council-owned property, which is the majority of in low-income houses have rented housing, or state-aided housing.